This is only one of many different Pokemon card backs. Let's take a quick history lesson into the many designs that occupy the reverse side of a Pokemon card. If we go in chronological order, we have to start with the original prototype Pokemon cards. More officially, these are called Alpha and Beta playtest cards, and they have many different iterations. These were produced by hand, being cut and pasted onto different backers. Some prototype cards have blank backs, but most of them just have this, which actually looks pretty darn close to the final design released in 1996. This is the original Pokemon card back, released in Japan, and yes, the words are in English, oddly enough. This was the only Pokemon card back for a couple of years before they released a holo version. Pretty cool, hey? This is from the Trade Please campaign in 1998, where kids would be asked to mail in their cards in exchange for new ones, hence the trade. But only this one, Imikuni's Trade Please, would have a holo back. This is one of only 2 cards ever to have a holo back, and we're coming up on the second one soon. In 1998, the Vending Series was released in Japan. These were released in 3 different parts, blue, red, and green. Vending Series 3, Green, was the last to be released in November of '98, and each sheet had one of these cards. Now, these were special cards that didn't feature pocket monsters, unless you count Uyama's Pikachu. They were special cards that altered the game's rules or provided different deck compositions to try out, or are just considered spoof cards. Perhaps you remember seeing this for the first time. This is the longest running Pokemon card back in the history of the TCG. It should be extremely familiar to everyone watching because it is also the current Pokemon TCG back for the international cards. And they were actually debuted for the first time in December 1998 in the 2-player demo pack. Shortly after this, though, the trainer decks were released. Trainer Deck A and Trainer Deck B were promotional decks made to teach people how to play the game. They were sent out to game stores so people could get a feel for the new TCG before the official launch. Every single one of these cards feature a back with red borders and a respective A or B. These are a really cool piece of Pokemon TCG history and a serious flex if you have the Blastoise or Machamp. But it was January 9th, 1999 when base set was finally released and most of us saw this for the first time. But that same year, in Japan, this guy was released. This is, of course, Ancient Mew, the peak, the pinnacle of my childhood. This single card is not only special for being a core memory for so many of us, but also the second card ever produced with a holo back. And there are a few different versions of this card, 6 actually, including the ones released here in North America. I made a whole video on it, but they all share the same back. And then something big happened in December 2001, Japan. The Japanese TCG redesigned their card back. It's not typical for a company to redesign the back of a card. Look at Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh!, both of which have their original design still. One of the reasons is to keep the game uniform and to prevent the player from knowing which card they're about to draw from their deck if they're not using sleeves. But it happened, and it is my personal opinion that the new design looks better. It dropped the copyright information on the bottom and changed from Pocket Monsters to Pokémon, more closely resembling the international version. One other change here is how the Pokeball opens. Pokeballs have 3 sections, the top, the bottom, and the black band in the middle that holds the button. In the international version and the old Japanese version, the black part is attached to the bottom of the ball, but in the updated Japanese design, it's actually attached to the top. And of course, in the anime, the Pokeball opens with the black part attached to the top. So it's widely understood that the way the Pokeball opens on the international cards is incorrect. After this, Pokemon card backs never changed. No, I'm just kidding. We got a brand new one every year. No, I'm serious. The World Championship deck backs started in 2004, and since then, we've gotten new ones every single year. So the way this works is that the Pokemon trading card game World Championships is held somewhere like Tokyo, Hawaii, or California, for example, and players who qualified that year are invited to go. A huge tournament is held, and 3 winners are crowned for the 3 age groups. But every year, 4 of the competitors' decks used in the tournament are turned into a real product that you can go out and purchase. This is really cool because it gives you the chance to grab a deck that you know is good and learn to use the winning strategies by the world's top players. But anyways, as you can see, each year the World Championship decks get their own unique back to them. It will always say Pokemon Trading Card Game World Championships with the respective year and a unique design, usually complementing the location or theme of the event. The World Championship was postponed and later cancelled for the pandemic, so there's no such thing as a 2020 or 2021 World Championship deck. Okay, I wanted to include some backs that are unofficial or don't really fit these standard criteria. There are a handful of Blastoise cards out there that were printed with a Magic the Gathering back. This is known as the prototype Blastoise or Protozoice. Some were also printed with a blank back, but I think we all know that the Magic one is cooler. The metal cards have the international back on them, but since they are made of metal, the Pokemon logo is reflective. It's this shiny gold. I think these deserve to go on the list just because they look so unique. The Pokemon Pocket cards have their own back design. Even though these are digital and don't have a physical counterpart, I thought it was cool that they sort of represent a mix between the international and Japanese versions. Like if the TCGs ever came together, they might look like this. Also, the Pokeball opens correctly. Oh, and the Crystal Pokemon box toppers that don't even have a back on them. These cards are acrylic and transparent. And the Legendary Collection Charizard box topper actually has a checklist on the back, like they expected you to write on this. The cards found in the Pokemon My First Battle product have their own unique back to them. These are cards that have been simplified in a way that makes the game easier to understand for youngsters. The Creatures deck was produced for the 25th anniversary of Pokemon and were exclusively handed out to employees and friends at Creatures. This half deck features really cool cards, each representing a year of the TCG. But they do each have their own unique back. Each back has a little write-up of the notable events and releases from that year, and a couple even have a small exclusive interview with President Tanaka and Chairman Ishihara. And for the finale, I wanted to add that some Pokemon cards have their back printed upside down or inverted. But at the factory, the back of the sheet is printed first, which means the front of the card is actually upside down, so it didn't make the list.